Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tips, tools, and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have a special guest. I have Ulrika Sullivan. Ulrika is a certified life coach, galactic astrologer, yoga teacher, energy healer, and host of the New Light Living podcast. She is passionate about helping others connect with their multi-dimensional selves by activating a spark so that they can take realistic steps on their journey toward inner sovereignty. She is the author of Wisdom Beyond What You Know, How to Shift from Being Driven by the Mind to Living from the Heart and Intuition. Welcome, Ulrika. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, Tanya. I'm so excited to be here.
So you and we're going to talk about connecting with the energy of the heart and how do we live a life energetically and intuitively. So I'm really excited about this show today because I haven't really gone into detail about this topic. And Ulrika, majority of us, including myself, we're taught from a very young age to look outside of ourselves, to focus on our education, to focus on our careers. And that's how we defined success. And so it can be difficult for some of us to relearn how to live from the heart because we've been so programmed to learn how to live from the mind. And so I wanted to kind of start off with, Ulrika, why do you think there is such a disconnect between what we are told to do, even from a very young age, to how we as humans are designed to be and to live?
Oh, such a great question. Thank you for asking that. And, I think when I talk about this topic, I want to make it real. And I often bring up this example because it really tells the story. And, how many of you who are watching or listening are feeling some sort of resistance in some area of your life? Like most people just I know. And that is a perfect example of where we are working against our own energy. Wherever we feel resistance, it means that our own life force, our own heart energy, it's all the same, is not flowing, right? Because when we feel, and at the same time, if I ask you, like, in what area of your life do you feel, yes, it's like it's flowing, it's going well, right? We have areas in our life that we do kind of everything just comes together. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. It's all about energy. And many of us have been, in my life and in my previous years, I really can identify now where I felt that resistance, long-term resistance, or even, every day feeling exhausted, for example, is on a continuous basis is a sign that we're working against our own heart energy, our own life force. So, yeah, I think, linking that into how we're programmed or taught what success is bringing some of us into a path of resistance because we're trying to fit in a mold, right? Or do things that
someone else's mold usually.
Yeah, someone else's mold, right? So I prefer to talk about this and give examples because of resistance, because everyone can relate to that. And everyone has some sort of experience of resistance, or whether we call it resistance or feeling contracted or we can relate to that type of thing, because otherwise, like, what's heart energy? I don't know, my heart beats, but so but yeah, to summarize it really is that transition, if you will, from going from a life where we feel resistance or boxed in, and freeing ourselves from that resistance in whatever area of our life it is. And some of us have like for myself specifically, my example is I felt this resistance in my career because I knew, my soul knew that there was something else for me behind that, perception of success, which made me go in a direction where I kind of contracted myself instead of expanding my energy. So now I'm expanding my energy. Now I'm in my element. But, we all have to learn what that difference is.
Yeah, and we've got to feel into that. And I've got a funny testimonial of that as well, Ulrika. When I worked in the corporate, in the healthcare field, I had worked in that particular job for 10 years. And it got to a point where we had to schedule more and more education at the hospital. And I was feeling really pressured. We had to do these yearly strategic plans. And every year I had to bump up the number of educations that I had to provide. And it started to take a toll on me because it wasn't happening. No one was, I covered like 12 hospitals. No one was responding to me. And then I went through this big awakening that year, and realized this isn't what I want to be doing anymore. And after I put in my resignation, I had actually given them a 3-month notice because I knew I would be transitioning and I needed them to have some time to transition. And the moment I put in my notice, I was getting emails and people were knocking on my door for education opportunities. And it just was so simple. I remember sitting there with my feet up on my desk being like, I was busting my butt to get these, in-services is what we called them, to coordinate. And then now I have more than enough educational opportunities. I had to start turning people down because it was just getting to be too much. And so I then realized I gave up resistance. I started to live my life more in the flow state. And I was really, really trying to kind of square peg round hole, that education and force it in there. And so I'm sure there's people out there right now that are like, I have been trying so hard to make something work right in my life, and it's just not happening. So what are your thoughts about just throwing your hands up, surrendering, and just saying, I give up, and going with the flow? What are your thoughts about that?
Yes. And it may sound like far-fetched to do, because ultimately, yes, that's what that's the way to go, right? But the path to that moment of surrender is really the journey, because it's much easier said than done, right? That's
it's scary
that
when you
complete
do
surrender. Yes. And that's really where we're at, right? How do we work that journey so that we fully can surrender from inside and out, instead of, because for many of us, it stays like an idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the work, some people in the spiritual community, we say, like, you have done the work. This is what it is.
Show on that.
It's that journey from, realizing that, I need to change, right? Or I need to change. Otherwise I can't, live as a true being or a true self. That's the journey to come to that point where we can say, okay, I feel truly inside out surrendered, and from A to B, right? That's what we're talking about.
And then, but the thing is once you surrender, it's really scary at that moment. But once you finally, it's like this release or relief, and then boom, it just kind of falls in your lap. And I've been recognizing this because I've been working on abundance and prosperity. And it's funny, the moment like last week, I told a friend, I just said, fine, I'll go back into the matrix and work. I can't do this anymore. And the moment I did that, I had client. I was like, really? Yeah. Like, that's all it took was for me to just surrender to this, control that I think we've all been slightly programmed to want to control. But when you just open up your energy and say, fine, I'll surrender to whichever way I need to go, then that's when that universal or that heart energy comes in and says, okay, here you go.
Yeah. No, it's all about energy that way, right? It's once we let go of that mind construct of what if, right? Or is it this or is it that, right? Yeah. and just let it be.
Yeah. And so in your
Mhm.
experience, when did you recognize or realize that you needed to shift, that you were, living your life being more mind driven, and that you needed to make that shift to being more heart centered?
Yeah. And for me, and this is different for everyone, but for me, I was basically pushed out of my situation by the universe. I know that now because I was not, I'm a very much, I have a lot of Taurus in my chart, in my
I was
energy, in
going
my
to say, are you an
natural
earth
energy.
sign?
Yeah, I'm a Virgo, but I have a lot of Taurus as well. So you can only imagine how persistent, or I persevered a long time, but the universe basically had to pull the rug under my feet to say, okay, it's time to change. And here you're going, right?
Whether you like it or
So
not.
yeah. So that's how it happened for me, but it doesn't have to be an event. It doesn't have to be a struggle. It can actually, what I've learned is, and what I teach others now, is that you can intentionally make this transition much easier on yourself. But a lot of people talk about the rock bottoms. A lot of people talk about something coming in from the left field, right? And some of us, like me, I had to have something from the left field, just shaking me up, right? But it doesn't have to be like that. And especially when I work with somebody's energy, is I can help them understand what actually is their intentional path that they can walk if they so wish, based on how their own energy works. Like if I had known that I'm just so stubborn, call it that, that I won't suggest a change myself, something has to give, right?
I call that the universal bitch slap.
Yeah, it would. It's a great
Like, where did
description.
that come
Yes.
from? It's like I'm walking my path, and then the universe is like, oh no, 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 no. You're meant to be over here. And
That's it.
you'd literally feel like the rug has been ripped out from underneath
Yeah.
you. And whew, it takes your breath away sometimes, doesn't
Yeah.
it? And so, that happened to me too, Ulrika, is that it was, I had this plan to leave this role and to start my business and do this. And then I moved across the country. I was guided to do all this. And then when I did all of that, all of these emotions came to the surface, and I actually went into what I call locked in syndrome. My whole body locked up on me, and I couldn't walk for about 4 months. And so all this emotion of fear and panic and what have I done? All of these the stress around finances and stability just came bubbling to the surface. And so what is your advice for those out there who want to make this a smooth transition? And at the time, I thought I was making this a smooth transition. I just didn't realize I had all this subconscious stuff I needed to clear. And so what's your advice, because you and I sound like we both went through a very similar situation,
Yes, we did.
that transition.
Yeah, some of the things I have learned, and that I want to share with anyone who's in that situation now, that you sense it's coming, the change has to come, or like that's what you want to do. It's really to get curious, because curiosity it cannot exist in collaboration with fear. It's two different energies, and often we get, as you described, locked into that fear, and we can't move, right? But that's a lower vibration, lower frequency of energy. So once you get curious, which means get curious can be ask yourself questions like, what is the opportunity here? How can I see it differently? What would be the next little step? Like all kinds of questions that has to do with an expansion of your energy, not like, oh, what if this happens, or what if this happens, and what if this happens? That you can sense the difference, right? As soon as you ask yourself something that feels you kind of, I am contracting, or I feel like I'm negotiating away myself. No, ask yourself questions that can actually help expand you into curiosity, higher levels of frequency, which has to do with not only curiosity, but creativity. Like we have this notion sometimes that creativity has to be, painting a picture, or, create something with our hands, but it actually is not. Creativity is just a way to connect with our life force, because creativity and life force is of the same nature. So that's my first tip. Ask yourself expanding questions. And first of all, before that, get interested in learning something new about yourself. Because if you're not interested in learning something new about yourself, then fine. It's okay not to evolve. It's okay to stay where you are. It's you doing it for you. But the minute you start to be willing to learn something new about yourself, whatever that may be, that's when the green light goes up and okay, it's go time.
Yeah. And
that would be my first advice.
That's excellent advice. And just living in that state of flow, and that feels good. And I think any amount of creativity, you're in a flow state. You're just like, oh, I'm just going to kind of, whatever you're creating, and I love that advice. That is some very potent advice right there. Be curious, because children are curious, right? You see our children very curious, getting into things and exploring. And sometimes we lose that as we grow older, and we've got to go back to that, that childlike curiosity and just learning a little bit more about ourselves. I've had several clients, I'll ask them, what things do you enjoy? And they don't even know how to answer the question, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you've experienced that too. And being curious will begin to allow you to figure out what it is that you do enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so important. And it's almost like we have to kind of come back to and allow ourselves that we can play even if we're adults. We can go back to being curious, and often that is what we have been taught, right? You have to be an adult, you have to be responsible, you have to be all of these things, right? But that doesn't mean we can't be all of those things. But it's that we're putting these limits to ourselves, and that's the journey. The work that we're talking about is to remove those limitations and start exploring ourselves back without listening to what everybody else is saying.
Exactly.
The external world. Yeah, that is the hard part. But we and many people I come across is not allowing themselves to that alone time in the sense that time to explore, time to be curious, time to, and it's about ourselves. It's not about all other people that we're serving. Sometimes we have to have a balance between that.
Absolutely. And that's powerful. And I've done a show on that, the power of solitude. And I've been in solitude for a while now, and I'm having a good time being in this stage in my life. And so, Ulrika, what were some of your greatest challenges or limitations to finally stepping into living a heart-based life?
Some of the limitations I experienced myself was really working still on, and that I'm working on still, I completely transparent with this, is to actually believe what my inner self is telling me, what my body is telling me, to start relying on the internal guidance system and the body over the mind. And this is a lifelong lesson, right? How can we actually start listening to what our intuition is telling us, like being more connected to the all, but also to our body, because the body knows, the body is very wise. And many of us don't really, we use our body as some sort of machine that is going to take us places or do things for us, right? But we don't use it as a source of information. Yeah. And I think that's a lesson that I definitely personally have learned a lot from, that I was completely limited and dissociated from way back. So it's a journey to come back to that inner message system, if you will, from the body perspective, but also from, trusting our own intuition, trusting what our inner voice, the wise voice, not the one that says, oh, is it this or is it that? That's the mind. But the the voice inside us that is that gentle, supportive, loving voice that only wants the best for us. That's what we are listening to.
Yeah, that
And
inner
that's,
being. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and that, I feel that that's definitely, some of the challenges sometimes, because it's a daily practice to connect to that pure source within ourselves.
It is, because that's who we are, that's who we organically are. And I think for me, one of my biggest challenges was overcoming what I felt like was imposter syndrome. It was like my mind, my body was telling me it's time for you to move more into an energetic, intuitive space. But yet my mind was telling me, that's not you. You're not an energy healer. What are you doing? What is wrong with you? So I have this chatter going on in my mind, but yet my body is telling me this is you. This is your divinity. This is who you are being. And it was really hard for me to kind of overcome that. And then finally, just learning how to calm the mind and then be present in the body, and then really actually realize that this is who I am. I have just been taught or told that I'm something else, and figuring that out. And so I think for me, that was one of my biggest challenges. And it still is to a certain extent, because as I evolve and grow, I begin to take different levels and different steps towards who I am and what I want to be. And so now I'm beginning to write a book, and then I've got the chatter, you're not an author, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yes, I am, so it's just this, constant, like you talked about, harmonizing and balancing, within ourselves.
Yeah, getting to know ourselves so well so that we actually can make intentional, conscious decisions around our own expansion, and listen to where we don't want to expand into as well, because it's very easy to look at others and see what they are or what they seem to have. But the truth is that the question that most people don't ask themselves, is it working for me? Like, what is it that I want? Which can be a very hard question to answer. But the other question that we can ask ourselves that is a little easier to get, maybe, does it work for me?
Mm-hmm. And how does
because often we take others' success or the way what they have, even on their journey to getting to know ourselves, it's easy to kind of say, oh, she's like this and that, and that's what I now want. But it's not really, we're not really there until we can say, okay, this is working for me, period.
Absolutely. And
without any
okay with that it could be different than what's working for others, right?
Yeah.
So, Ulrika, I want to dive a little bit into your book, So Wisdom Beyond What You Know. And you list 7 different inner shifts that could help shift us from a heart-centered life into, from a mind space life into a heart-centered life. And so can you briefly kind of walk us through those 7 different steps?
I would love to. And just, you can be an author, Tanya.
I know.
I want to tell you.
I'm an excellent writer. People have told me this my whole life, but you've got that little naggy little ego in there saying, oh, no, what do you think?
I just want to give you a little good energy. And because I'm also a first-time author, and of course it's a process of expansion. But my book really is what I call an actionable spiritual self-help book. Because with all the theories and ideas that are out there on how to do things, when we are stepping into our journey, we want to have, at least I wanted to have, some sort of tangible things to work with, not just to, and the reason for that is I didn't want it to just be an idea. I wanted it to actually have results in my life that our daily life is how we can see a change. It's not some event 5 years from now. It's like today, right? Now. So that's really the fundamentals of the book, is that I have included coaching exercises in each of the chapters. In each single of the 18 chapters, there is something for everyone to kind of, put your teeth in and work with. But the 7 inner shifts is really the third part of the book. And prior to that kind of how-to, comes, how can we identify those habits and patterns? Part one is really about identifying all those things we want that is not serving us anymore. And often it's habits and patterns that we can identify if we think like, oh, okay, what is it that I do? Or what is it that I inherited from my family that I don't really agree with anymore?
Yeah.
Or it doesn't work for me, right? That's that question again. And the second part is really outlining what is heart-centered living, because it's a term, it's a buzzword, but what is it really? So I outline in part 2 of the book, like some of the elements of heart-centered living that have to be considered, right? Such as intuition, nature, creativity, all of those things that we have to kind of consider moving into and leaving behind all the ego attachments, if you will. But the shifts really are as follows, and I'll do it really quick. Shift number 1 is what we already talked about. It's that willingness to ask ourselves those questions. And the comfort zone is a gravitational field. The comfort zone is huge. Yeah. So unless we have that rug under, pulled underneath us or anything else that makes us really, okay, this is it. It's now, I'm not going back. The comfort zone, we have to get through and beyond that. So that's really step 1 and shift number 1. So I give some tips and experiences around that. Too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is like, yeah, without that, we're always going to revert back to the comfort zone, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the second shift is from, this disconnected sense from our true self into becoming a self-aware about, and again, it's about asking ourselves those questions, learning something new about ourselves. And because self-awareness is really, that's where the transformation is happening. So shift number 1 and 2 are like, yeah, that's it. Once we are on our way to learning new things about ourselves and what's true for us and not, it's this release of codependency to becoming sovereign. Mm-hmm. And that third shift is especially what I've, for women, it's this sense of we have to serve everyone first before we can put ourselves at the top of the mountain in our own life, right? But this is really the process. That third shift is about going from the codependency we have to our external world or our family or, relatives, friends, to really making space for ourselves in our own life.
And when you say sovereign, just for those out there that don't know what that term means, can you just explain that?
Yeah. Sovereignty or self-sovereignty for me is when we can stand in our power in our own life and say, okay, this works for me, this does not. It's basically boundaries and self-empowerment that I put in self-sovereignty, if you will. But as an imagery, like imagine yourself being high up on a mountain, looking out over the eagle's perch in your own life and live from that space. Instead, and the opposite is when we put ourselves at the very bottom of the totem pole and we always kind of get to do the thing last after we have served everybody else. That's the opposite of sovereignty.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for explaining that. I love that.
Now, after we have become someone that can stand in our power, irrespective of what goes on beyond outside of us, is we have this opportunity to shift from learning, because many of us we want to learn more. We're going to do the next course, the next retreat. That is the shift from learning to embodying. And embodying can only, I usually talk about this quite a lot, but simply, embodiment can never happen without really going through it. So to shift to really work with this shift. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, again, move from the learning experience, right? Taking in new information to actually go through the experience. And that's, that can sometimes be where we have to overcome this quick fix syndrome, because the quick fix syndrome is fueled by learning more. while the embodiment is really kind of, okay, this is life, right? We have to go through it in our life and experience. That's when we become it. Now,
Wow, that's
after that,
powerful.
yeah, and it's such a shift when we can see where we are still in that learning mode versus when we actually are embodying it. And with that comes the next shift, when we go from logic to wisdom. Because wisdom comes from within. Wisdom comes from experience, bringing out those talents and gifts that we have not had to learn, but that we are.
Yeah.
And this is where we link back to, ancestral heritage, galactic heritage. Bringing that out and bringing that forth, getting to know it, is really the wisdom of us.
Yeah.
And then the two last shifts are very familiar, the going from the pushing to manifesting. A lot of people wants to go to this shift right away.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to manifest. Like, how do I do it? Well, how about you start with shift number one? Yeah. So this is very strategically placed because the manifesting bit is a hot topic. And many people want to jump to that shift number 6 right away without doing the previous ones or having an experience of the previous shifts. The last shift is really when we go from our sense of being separate or individual to multidimensional perspective. And that's when we start to relate to others and our environment in a completely new way.
Yeah, and being able to see your external reality and realize that you're the one creating that, right? So you're like, I think I'm in that space right now. It's like, oh, why am I experiencing that? I know I created that. What energy am I putting off that is now creating that experience in my life?
Yeah.
And that's those are powerful shifts. Thank you for sharing those. And, I think each and every one of those, you really want to sit with that and like, okay, have I really embodied and embraced this shift right now? And am I ready to move on, to the next one? And so are those going to progress linearly, or do you just kind of bounce around on those, or what are your thoughts?
Yes. I mean, as humans, we want to have like, what's the process? Step 1, step 2, step 3, right? So it was a natural way to describe it. But yes, you're absolutely right. It's a multiverse. You have to kind of be open to experiences over here that impacts over here. And it's a way to lay it out in a book because you have page after page after page, but think about it as a spiral of energy that you grow within yourself and grow and integrate. So that's how I prefer to think about how this can be worked with. But of course, we have to we have to kind of take it in, which is our logical mind wants a step-by-step process, right? So,
Well, it helps you look at where you've grown to. I know when you have that step-by-step, you can kind of look back and say, wow, this is where I was at step 1. And look how much I've grown, since then. So it does help when you're looking, in hindsight to be able to do that. And so you also discuss in your book, the importance of not only taking care of ourselves physically and emotionally, but also energetically. And this is exactly what I talk about on my show all the time, is how, we've kind of been taught as a society that the energetic, self-care, I guess, so to speak, isn't even in existence. And so let's talk a little bit more about that, becoming more aware of our own energy and maybe the energy when we do interact with others and even our environment. So can you share a little bit more about that and how you talked about that in your book?
Yes. This is one of the most important topics I feel that we're moving into more mainstream right now. Because if you think about the past, the putting ourselves in the box and going down a template, right? That is as much of energy, kind of non-considerate energy work, right? Now it's by going within ourselves, knowing ourselves more, we also realize that we bring a unique energy. Our soul has a unique energy imprint. And, we are bringing ancient wisdom back, such as astrology, to help us as humans to interpret our own unique imprint. And I work with astrology, galactic astrology, both, and also energy systems like human design or the gene keys. But all of these systems are ways of tapping into the uniqueness about us. And it can be described in energy. It can be described through the lens of astrology or the lens of human design or so. But I prefer to combine them all. And I am a big believer, like one of the biggest things we can do is to ask ourselves, okay, what is my unique energy? Mm-hmm. And that generates a question to go and look for what's already out there that I can learn about myself through the lens of astrology, through the lens of human design or the gene key. So that's step one. I feel that there's so much we can learn about ourselves just by using or get a reading, right, from someone like me or someone that can interpret and channel that
wisdom
information.
And being curious, that takes us back to being curious as well and trying.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And energy is something that once we start to kind of, and I'll give you an example. For example, in my career, I take that as an example because it's really where most of my learning happened. Was I am of the energy sign of someone who people need to come to, not me going out and let's say sell something or, the idea. I lived in the corporate world as the ideal go-getter for many, many years while working against my own energy. And I wasn't aware then that I actually am somebody that somebody has to come to.
I learned that too, the manifesting generator through the human design. I did a show on that and she did a reading on me. And I very similarly to you, my guests on the show come to me. They reach out to me and I noticed the ones that I was reaching out to, I wasn't resonating with as well. And so it's really funny that once you recognize that, it brings you back into that flow state.
And just that piece of awareness that brought to me, that's how my natural energy works, changed the whole career for me, changed the whole way I'm interacting with my career or what I do next, right? So imagine what that piece of insight can do for you if you're watching or listening. Like, and we go back to kind of where in my life do I feel resistance? Maybe there's something I'm working against my own natural energy flow. So energy we can be aware. I think that's my message here. Energy is just not something that we have as okay, this happened. I reacted a certain way in an interaction with somebody else, for example. It can help us be more aware of, that and bring less resistance into our life, right? So I don't know if that helps, but it's that awareness piece that I feel is so important, and energy awareness is because then if we have that awareness, we can make conscious decisions.
Yeah. And it also, it reflects back to us in our external reality. And then we can go and tweak things. We're like, ooh, okay, I'm seeing this pattern, or I haven't seen that pattern for a while, but now it's coming back again. And I recently had this happen where I was noticing certain female friends in my life were trying to control who I was spending my time with or how I was spending time with. And so I had to kind of go back and do some healing work on that. I had a lot of masculine females in my life with that masculine energy. And so I had to look at myself and say, what energy am I putting off that is attracting that to me? And so once I began to kind of tweak that a little bit, I noticed those started to soften a little bit, those interactions. And I wasn't, I guess, manifesting or attracting those types of relationships in my life. And so it can be a really valuable learning experience when you begin to tune into your own energy, right?
Yes. And the second piece to this is also that once we realize that we actually can manage our own energy, if you will, we can become more sovereign in a way, right? We can put energetic boundaries around ourselves. Let's say if we're someone that is not really into crowds, right? There's a natural design for being more one-on-one with people. When in situations when we have to be with a crowd, we can actually put an energetic shield around us. For example,
it feels like we're alone.
Yeah, no, but it provides this energetic boundaries that so many of us don't have, because here we are at a big gathering, let's say, coming home exhausted, and we don't know why. And we can intentionally work with our own energy to be in charge of our own energy. And that's like the next step after becoming, okay, how does my energy work? But to go from there to actually manage your own energy and be in charge of your aura, that's
mastery. That's
mastery. Yes.
And it takes some time to get there. And then once you get there, it becomes autopilot, right? I know it does for me, because I worked on doing that. And now I just, it just naturally kind of just happens. But it takes some time to work on being aware of your energy. And every time it'll sneak in a little bit, and I'm like, ooh, okay, I gotcha. I'm not in control of my own energy. I feel that.
Great job, Tanya.
You're like, woohoo! I'm finally getting this. It's like taking the training wheels off the bike. I'm like, all right, I'm riding my, when I was a kid, I used to ride my 10-speed with no hands. And now I'm like, I'm getting to the point of being able to handle my energy with maybe one hand, You
got it. You got it. Yeah. And the benefit of it all is that inner peace, right? That inner sovereignty, inner freedom, if you will, that this all brings to us once we feel that we're not victim anymore. We're not victim to other people's behaviors. We're not victim to situations that are going on outside us. We can be here, we can be now in our own energy, and we're safe. And I think that's what people experience once they get curious about all of this.
Yeah. And there's power to that, because, there was a time when I was like, oh, I got to go out. I'm going to absorb everyone's energy. And that is a victim consciousness. I was setting myself up for that, where now it's like, no, I'm holding my frequency, and they're going to level up to my vibration, so it's just me taking on my own frequency and my own energy. And that in itself creates that inner sovereignty. Absolutely. So earlier this week, I had a guest on that talked about Vedic astrology, but you said that you do galactic astrology. Can you share with us a little bit more about what that is and how it differs from other astrologies?
I'm excited about that, because galactic astrology, I've been, interested in astrology for a long time. And when I came across galactic astrology as, certification, becoming a practitioner, it's just like, yeah, that's it. And what this is really bringing us is a multidimensional perspective of our energy, basically. So, and what does that mean? Traditional astrology and Vedic astrology is a different system in a way. So what I practiced in the beginning was tropical Western astrology. I know that there's two different systems.
Talk about the differences. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's nothing right and wrong, right? It's just two different lenses. Now, we can apply galactic astrology to any of these systems. And basically what it is, it's the outer layer outside our solar system. Let's say the planets, and we are looking at in traditional, what I call traditional systems of astrology, is pretty much our solar system here, our galaxy, Milky Way galaxy. Galactic astrology goes beyond that. It includes the fixed stars. It includes other planetary bodies and black holes, and etc. And the reason is that we're starting to realize our multidimensional self is including actually, our energy and our soul's journey. And our soul's journey has been taking place on Earth, of course, but it has also been taking place out in the universe. And this is, it really came about because it's a merge between, past life regression
Mm-hmm.
and astrology. It's really a combination of that. So the intuitive bit to this is essential for galactic astrology, because otherwise, how do you go into someone's soul's journey and decode kind of what they have been part of? So when galactic astrology, what that is giving you the filter of how the fixed stars are aligned to your birth chart, basically.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. And I'm just, I've always been interested in astrology. Like I said on my last show, I know my sun, my moon sign, and then my rising, but it's really interesting to see the different types and to see that they are different lenses, right? And I love how you also incorporate many different modalities when you are working with people. And I do the same. I could be in a quantum healing session and I'm tapping while they're in theta state, and so can you share with us a little bit more about some of the services that you provide for people?
Yes, my main service really is a one-on-one coaching package with me, but that's really where we do the work. What precedes, though, you can enter kind of that package from different angles. Either you can have a reading with me, like galactic astrology or traditional astrology, or I do what we call solar returns, where we look at the birthday to birthday kind of astrology. But it all is centered around this curiosity around learning something new about ourselves, learning the energy awareness, and doing that over some time. I work with people a minimum 3 months. Mm-hmm. And a reading, let's say, often is an accelerator that kicks something off, right? People come divinely guided. They know that if somebody is connecting with my aura and resonate with that, they come to me because their soul knows that they're ready for that. And
there's often some wisdom that you're meant to share with them.
Yeah, that it's what we call soul recognition, right? Mm-hmm. And so often a reading kicks something off, or there's some people that are going right into the coaching program right away. But that's how you can work with me. I recommend a reading first, and then we'll take that to integrate that into your daily life, those insights from a reading, for example. And it depends on what you're curious about. I customize that into something that's really valuable and for where you are at on your journey. I'm also an intuitive, so I kind of work with all kinds of modalities, such as cards. I use pendulum. I use, automatic writing. All kinds of those things builds your energetic blueprint that I lay out. And then we look at the gap, kind of what's your situation now? Where in your life do you feel resistance? How satisfied are you with, your life? We can assess various areas of your life, and then we take it from there. Where do you want to be? And one thing that I often highlight is that I'm professionally trained to help navigate your own journey. So it's not this, many people come to me, oh, can you give me the answer? What is my purpose?
No, that's everybody's question. What is our purpose? Our purpose is to be, right?
If it was that easy, I would give you the answer, right? But the work in this is for you to come to that conclusion yourself. And so it's more of a partnership. I
call this like a fulcrum, like a leverage, right? Like, because I had a practitioner tell me that one time, I had such pain in my back, and I was using every modality I could pull out of my tool belt, and it wasn't working. And so I went to someone who does what's called visceral manipulation. It's intuitive massage and all these variety of things, but she immediately got right to the issue. And then I'm like, I've been spending months on this. How did you do that? She goes, you had a blind spot and I acted as a fulcrum. I acted as a lever, to leverage you up. And so I do think, I do talk a lot about how we can heal ourselves naturally and intuitively from within, but there are times when it's crucial or beneficial for us to reach out to others because we can't see our own blind spots sometimes. And I am definitely a testimonial for that. And so I love that, sometimes, and it's fun sometimes to go through our journey with others, right? I'm sure that you feel that with some of your coaching clients that, it's fun to see the growth in others. And I'm sure you feel this too. When I'm going through something, I attract clients that are going through the same thing because we're on the same vibrational level, right? And so as I work with them, I notice that I'm shifting as well. And that is so valuable and rewarding for me.
Yeah,
I love that.
It's so powerful how you describe that. And it's very, very true. And yeah, it's that accountability and not feeling that you're alone. Many clients feel that support and that they actually wouldn't have done it. They would have waited, procrastinated. They would have it's that lever, right? It's that support, the accelerator, whatever we call it, right? So
yeah. And so how can people connect with you? What's the best way for them to find you?
Yes, I would love either you visit my website, ulrikasullivan.com. It's my name.com. Or just email me, ulrika@ulrikasullivan.com. So if you have my name, you know where to contact me, and you have everything there. And I also have a podcast. But I would say the easiest way is to just email me or, submit your question or thought on my contact page on my website. I'm also on social media, YouTube, Instagram. It's all my name. So if you have my name, you'll find me.
Well, great. And I'm going to add all those links below the show on YouTube and on the podcast as well.
Thank you.
Ulrika, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. This was I knew this was going to be a fun show. And thank you for providing such value. I really felt like I got a lot out of this show, and I know that the listeners tuning in will as well. So thank you so much for just being a shining light in the world and for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. And I'm really excited about your first book, Wisdom Beyond What You Know. So for those of you out there, check out her book, check out her website, and learn more about Ulrika Sullivan. Thank you.
Thank you, Tonya. It's been an honor.
You deserve to navigate your life in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.theexistentialempath.com.